You are now listening to the Vegan Stuff podcast with Caavakushi.
Hosting this podcast today are our two AI hosts, Sam and Kim. If you simply can't get enough of us, go to caavakushi.com and sign up for our vegan newsletter and get our free 7-day high-protein vegan meal plan. And we also have some good news. We will be releasing our first ever cookbook pretty soon, so stay tuned. Hey, don't forget to follow us on our socials too.
Imagine the Terminator, right? Like, picture that absolute peak 1980s action hero aesthetic. You were probably visualizing him pumping iron, his muscles, practically bursting through the screen.
Oh, absolutely. And fueling all of that with the standard issue diet of that era. Copious amounts of meat, eggs, dairy, you name it.
Right, exactly. And that was the blueprint, it was the blueprint for traditional masculinity and just physical invincibility.
Totally.
But now I want you to take that exact same global icon, flash forward to the present day, and imagine him sitting at this rustic kitchen table, right? And he is happily sharing a bowl of mixed greens with a pet donkey named Lulu and a pig named Schnelly.
It is quite the visual, honestly.
It really is. So welcome to a very special deep dive under the banner of the Vegan Stuff with Caavakushi community. I'm your host, Sam, and I am joined by our expert co-host, Kim.
It is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we are so glad to have you. Today, we are breaking down the medical crises that basically forced the ultimate alpha male to radically rewrite his biology, his diet, and honestly, his entire philosophy on strength. We are going to let us delve into how the Terminator became the Germinator, I guess you could say.
Goodness, the Germinator. I love that. But yes, we are taking a really comprehensive look at just an astonishing physiological and honestly psychological pivot.
Yeah.
Our focus today rests on a huge mountain of recent sources that detail his transition to an 80% plant-based diet over the last 5 years.
Which is huge.
It is. We will examine the intense cardiovascular catalysts behind this change, the advanced metabolic mechanics of how he maintains his legendary muscle mass without relying on traditional whey isolates, and the fascinating endocrinological benefits of his animal-filled home life.
Right. And, the visual of him feeding a donkey at the kitchen table is incredible. It is all over the internet. But beneath that viral internet cuteness is a really gripping story of survival.
Definitely. It is a matter of life and death, really.
Yeah, because we cannot understand his current 80% plant-based lifestyle without first understanding the medical reality that kind of backed him into a corner. We are talking about a man who built $1 billion empire on the illusion of being an indestructible machine.
Right.
But the sources highlight that over the last few years, the primary catalyst forcing this dietary evolution was, it was a series of 3 major heart surgeries.
Yeah, and the psychological weight of 3 major cardiac procedures, it really cannot be overstated.
I can't even imagine.
For an average individual, a single heart surgery is a traumatizing brush with mortality, But for someone whose entire public persona, his career trajectory, his internal identity, all of it was inextricably linked to physical dominance and physiological perfection.
Yeah, he was the literal standard for human perfection.
Exactly. So the failure of the cardiovascular system, it represents a profound existential crisis. The external armor of skeletal muscle, it remains completely intact, but the internal engine powering it is faltering. It completely strips away the illusion of invincibility.
Yeah, you spend half a century cultivating the ultimate muscular defense system,
Right.
only to realize that the threat isn't coming from the outside.
Right. It is in turn.
It is coming from the inside, from the very plumbing that keeps you alive.
Yeah.
And the courses we have are incredibly specific about how he responded to this internal threat.
They are.
Because this wasn't just some casual foray into, meatless Mondays for the sake of a Hollywood trend. He actively credits his shift to an 80% plant-based diet with significantly lowering his LDL, or bad cholesterol.
Yes. And I think we really need to unpack the biological mechanics of that, because the relationship between plant-based eating and cholesterol management is often so oversimplified in the media.
Oh, totally. It's always just eat plants, get healthy, but there is a real mechanism there.
Exactly. So LDL, or low-density lipoprotein, is essentially a transport vehicle. It carries cholesterol from the liver to the body's cells. And when the cardiovascular system is subjected to high amounts of animal-based saturated fats over decades, which, let's be honest, was the absolute hallmark of the traditional bodybuilding diet, the liver's LDL receptors actually become downregulated.
Wait, downregulated, what does that mean exactly?
It means the liver literally stops pulling LDL out of the bloodstream. It shuts the doors, so to speak.
Oh, wow. So leaving all those transport vehicles stranded in the bloodstream, just bumping into the walls of the arteries.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, yeah.
Yeah.
A huge traffic jam. And those stranded LDL particles, they become susceptible to oxidation.
Like rusting almost.
Very similar, yes. Once they are oxidized, they penetrate the delicate inner lining of the blood vessels, which is called the endothelium. And the immune system responds to this invasion by sending macrophages, which are these immune cells.
Okay.
And these macrophages engorge themselves on the oxidized LDL until they literally die, forming what we call foam cells.
Ugh, that sounds awful.
It is. This is the exact genesis of arterial plaque. The plaque hardens, it narrows the arteries, and it places just catastrophic stress on the heart. So after 3 surgeries, the medical imperative was clear. He had to halt the progression of endothelial dysfunction.
Right, because the only way to stop a flood is to turn off the faucet.
Yeah.
He had to stop downregulating his liver's LDL receptors with heavy animal fats.
Exactly.
But, for you, the listener, who is sitting there as a dedicated member of the vegan community, I really have to bring up the obvious friction point in the sources here.
Yes. The percentage.
Yeah, the percentage. Because he is 80% plant-based.
Right.
He still consumes meat or animal products 20% of the time.
Right.
And for an audience like ours, deeply committed to a 100% vegan lifestyle for ethical, environmental, and health reasons, how do we process an icon who is essentially, riding the fence? It can be frustrating.
It can be, and we process it through the lens of macro-level public health influence, really,
Right.
and the disruption of cultural paradigms.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, the desire for prominent figures to perfectly align with our ethical absolutes is entirely natural. We want heroes who go all the way. However, the sheer scale of his influence provides a very different kind of value.
Because he reaches people we probably never could.
Exactly. We're talking about a former Mr. Olympia, a man who authored the Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. That is a text that codified meat-heavy diets for literal generations of men.
Yeah, guys treated that book like a Bible.
They did. So for that specific man to loudly and proudly advocate for an 80% plant-based diet to his millions of followers, it is a seismic event in public health messaging.
I see what you mean. It creates an accessibility bridge. Because, if he came out tomorrow and demanded absolute 100% vegan perfection from a demographic of older, traditional men who have eaten steak every single day of their lives, the psychological barrier to entry would be insurmountable.
They would completely dismiss him.
Right. They would just say, oh, he went crazy or he got soft.
Exactly. And the psychology of behavior change heavily supports that analysis. Absolute ultimatums often trigger what we call the what the hell effect in dietary psychology.
The what the hell effect. I love that. What is that?
It is a documented phenomenon where if a person feels they cannot be perfectly compliant, like perfectly vegan, they just abandon the effort entirely. They say, what the hell, I already messed up, and they default back to their standard meat-heavy diet.
Right. Like eating one cookie on a diet and then just eating the whole sleeve because you already ruined it.
Precisely. By presenting an 80% plant-based framework, he removes the pressure of perfection. He highlights progress, longevity, and ultimately cardiovascular survival.
Yeah, he is demonstrating that substituting the vast majority of your animal products with plant-based alternatives yields these dramatic, life-saving physiological benefits.
Right. And for the general public facing the exact same cardiac risks he did, his approach completely dismantles the entrenched narrative that meat is intrinsically tied to masculinity or strength.
It totally rewrites his legacy. He isn't just the guy from the 1970s pumping iron era who told everyone to consume absurd amounts of eggs and chicken anymore.
Yeah, not at all.
He is now the guy demonstrating how to age gracefully and protect your heart by utilizing plants. And that actually brings up the most fascinating mechanical question from our sources.
The protein question.
The protein question. Because if he is doing this to protect his heart, how is he maintaining that legendary muscle mass without the old bodybuilding staples?
Right.
I mean, the sources state he has actively cut back on traditional supplements, specifically quitting protein shakes.
Yes.
He is relying instead on a diet incredibly high in fiber and securing his protein from whole plant foods, which is just wild to think about.
The decision to abandon protein shakes in favor of high-fiber whole foods is perhaps the most radical departure from traditional fitness dogma we've seen from him.
Because everyone thinks you need the powder.
Right. The multi-billion-dollar supplement industry has spent decades conditioning the public to believe that isolated, hyper-processed whey protein powders are absolutely mandatory for muscle maintenance, especially as we age.
Yeah.
By rejecting the shakes, he is exposing the massive flaws in that reductionist approach to nutrition.
I look at it like upgrading a municipal power grid.
Oh, I like this. Go on.
Well, the old bodybuilding diet was like running a city on a massive, dirty coal plant. Sure, the coal plant, which is, the way it isolates the cows of chicken, it generates a ton of raw energy to build the city, build the muscle.
Right.
But it leaves behind a massive amount of toxic byproduct. It clogs the surrounding environment. And over decades, the infrastructure just degrades.
A perfect analogy for endothelial damage.
Exactly. So what he has done now is transition his body's power grid to solar and wind. It's clean energy. The city is still powered. The muscles are still maintained. But the cardiovascular infrastructure isn't being choked by the exhaust.
That is a phenomenal way to explain it. And the linchpin of that clean energy system, as you put it, is fiber.
Right, which no one in the classic bodybuilding world ever talks about.
Never. The singular obsession is always protein. Yet our sources emphasize his high fiber intake as the absolute cornerstone of his current regimen.
So how does the fiber actually work as clean energy?
Well, soluble and insoluble fiber are really the unsung heroes of longevity, and their absence in traditional bodybuilding diets is a massive blind spot. The mechanism by which fiber manages his cholesterol is just profoundly elegant.
Break it down for us.
So we discussed earlier how the liver creates bile. It uses cholesterol to help digest fats in the intestines. Normally, the body is highly efficient and reabsorbs about 95% of that bile back into the bloodstream.
Which is an efficient system unless your blood is already completely overloaded with cholesterol.
Precisely the issue. When he consumes vast quantities of soluble fiber, which is found abundantly in the lentils, beans, and oats that our sources mention he relies on, that fiber acts as a viscous sponge in the digestive tract.
A sponge.
Yes, it physically binds to the bile acids, and because the human body cannot digest fiber, it passes through the system, carrying the bile acids out of the body as waste.
Wait, really? So the body literally just flushes the cholesterol away?
It does. But the secondary effect is where the true brilliance of the human body really shines. Because the liver just lost its bile supply, right? It panics.
It's like, hey, I need that.
Exactly. It needs to manufacture more bile to digest the next meal. And to do this, it requires cholesterol. So it rapidly upregulates those LDL receptors we talked about earlier.
Oh, the doors open back up.
Yes. It actively pulls the dangerous LDL cholesterol out of the bloodstream to use as building blocks for new bile. So a high-fiber diet forces the body to constantly strip its own blood of bad cholesterol.
That is incredible. The lentils are basically forcing the liver to act as a blood vacuum for plaque-causing particles.
That is exactly what is happening.
Man, that is so cool. But, okay, addressing the skepticism a lot of fitness enthusiasts might have listening to this, how does a man in his 70s maintain actual muscle tissue on lentils and beans without the rapid absorption of a whey protein isolate?
It is a fair question.
Because, we are taught that as you age, anabolic resistance sets in, and you need highly bioavailable, rapid digesting protein to trigger muscle synthesis.
And the concept of anabolic resistance in aging adults is very real. It is not a myth. As we get older, our muscles really do become less responsive to the amino acids circulating in our blood.
So you need more protein to get the same result.
Right. You require a higher threshold of protein, specifically the amino acid leucine, to trigger the mTOR pathway, which is essentially the cellular switch for muscle growth.
Right, mTOR.
So whey protein isolates are highly refined to spike amino acid levels instantly. They flip that switch hard. However, that rapid spike comes with severe biological costs that a 70-year-old cardiovascular system simply cannot afford.
You were talking about the insulin spike, right?
The insulin spike, the subsequent crash, and just the sheer metabolic stress of processing isolated, matrix-free nutrients, it is very hard on the body.
So what happens when he eats the lentils instead?
When he derives his protein from whole plant foods like chickpeas and greens, he is consuming amino acids bundled within a complex food matrix, a matrix of fiber, water, phytonutrients, and antioxidants.
Right.
The digestive system has to work methodically to dismantle this matrix. It takes time.
It's a slow release mechanism.
A perfectly calibrated slow release mechanism, yes. This ensures a steady, sustained trickle of amino acids into the bloodstream over several hours. This prevents the oxidative stress associated with rapid nutrient spikes.
That makes so much sense.
And furthermore, the antioxidants inherent in the plant matrix actively quench the free radicals produced during his workouts. And remember, recovery is where muscle is actually maintained.
Right, you build muscle when you rest, not when you lift.
Exactly. By bathing his tissues in an anti-inflammatory, high-fiber, plant-based nutrient stream, he is optimizing recovery and circumventing the need for highly processed powders that would otherwise inflame his vascular system.
It is just a complete re-education on what fuels human vitality.
Yeah.
He really proves that the powdered synthetic route is entirely optional, even at the highest levels of age-defying fitness.
It truly is.
And, what makes this deep dive so compelling to me is how this internal shift, this embrace of clean, compassionate plant fuel, has mirrored a stunning transformation in his external environment as well.
Yes, the shift at home.
The compassion has literally migrated from his plate right into his living room.
The curation of his immediate environment is such a critical component of this story. Our sources paint a very vivid picture of a home life that is practically overflowing with rescue dogs, farm animals, and most notably, Lulu the donkey and Schnelly the pig.
It is just the most jarring, wonderful juxtaposition.
It really is.
Because you walk into the home of the Terminator, right? And you expect, medieval swords on the walls, and maybe a motorcycle parked in the hallway.
Leather jackets everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, you find a man who can bench press a small car, sitting at his kitchen island, gently feeding a side salad to a miniature donkey and a pig. The internet videos of him recruiting these animals for his daily fitness routines are completely absurd, but they're entirely captivating.
They are very charming. And the sources actually include a quote from his son, Patrick Schwarzenegger, who affectionately describes his father's current lifestyle as a cross between Dr. Dolittle and a midlife crisis.
A midlife crisis. That is hilarious.
It is a very humorous observation, but I think it warrants a deeper sociological and psychological analysis.
I agree, because a traditional midlife crisis for a wealthy, powerful man usually looks very different.
Very different.
It usually involves clinging desperately to youth and dominance. You buy the bright red sports car, you adopt a reckless lifestyle, you try to aggressively outrun mortality. But he didn't buy a sports car to feed his ego. He adopted a donkey to feed his soul.
That is beautifully put. And I would argue that it is the exact antithesis of a crisis. A crisis implies a loss of control and a frantic grasping at external validation.
Right.
What he is demonstrating is a profound evolution of empathy and emotional maturity. Historically, the archetype of the alpha male, which he obviously helped define, positions man as the conqueror of nature.
Oh, totally. Man versus wild.
Exactly. Animals in that paradigm are either resources to be consumed, like the massive amounts of chicken he used to eat, or props to demonstrate dominance.
But by bringing a pig and a donkey into his kitchen, he completely dismantles that hierarchy.
He obliterates it. He isn't keeping them in a pasture miles away. He is sharing his living space, his meals, and his daily routines with them. When he shares a bowl of greens with Lulu, as the anecdotes and the sources describe, he is recognizing these animals as sentient companions. He is sharing space horizontally, not vertically.
Wow, horizontally, not vertically. I love that.
And this lived-in daily compassion resonates intensely with the core tenets of veganism. It is the recognition that animals possess intrinsic value beyond their utility to humans.
Absolutely. But, I want to explore the physical benefits of this beyond just the pure emotional joy, because he actually exercises with these animals.
He does.
They're literally wandering around his home gym while he lifts. Is there an actual physiological benefit to doing bicep curls while a pig watches you? Does this Dr. Dolittle environment actively contribute to his physical longevity?
That absolutely does. The physiological benefits of human-animal interaction are heavily documented in endocrinological research.
Really? So it's not just a mood boost?
Oh, no. It is hard science. When we discuss aging and longevity, one of the most destructive forces in the human body is chronic stress, specifically elevated levels of cortisol.
Right, the stress hormone.
Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. Its primary function during a stress response is to break down tissues, including muscle mass, to flood the bloodstream with glucose for immediate energy.
Wait, so chronic stress literally eats your muscles away.
It does. It accelerates sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss, and it damages the endothelial lining of the blood vessels.
Oh, no.
Yes, which compounds the exact cardiovascular issues he was already trying to escape. However, interacting with animals, especially in a bonded, affectionate manner, actively suppresses the HPA axis.
The HPA axis.
The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. That is the system which controls cortisol production. So interacting with the animals suppresses it.
So it is like an organic stress blocker.
It goes beyond just blocking stress. It actively promotes neurochemical healing. When he looks into the eyes of his rescue dogs or he pets Snelly the pig, his brain releases oxytocin.
The cuddle hormone.
Exactly, colloquially known as the love hormone. But biochemically, oxytocin is a highly potent cardiovascular protector. It naturally lowers blood pressure and induces vasodilation, which is the widening of blood vessels.
That is amazing.
And simultaneously, these interactions trigger the release of dopamine and serotonin. Those are the neurotransmitters associated with joy and relaxation.
So it basically creates the ultimate anabolic environment. You lower the muscle-destroying cortisol, and you boost the vascular-protecting oxytocin, all while doing your resistance training.
Precisely.
Working out with a pig is no big deal when you're Arnold, but it certainly brings home the vegan bacon. The joy he derives from his animals is essentially a performance-enhancing mechanism for healthy aging.
That is a very clever way to phrase it. And the synthesis of all these elements is really what makes the sources so illuminating.
Yeah.
When we analyze the cardiovascular interventions, the dietary overhaul from whey to whole food fiber, and the endocrinological benefits of his animal companions, a grand holistic blueprint for longevity really emerges.
It does. And the sources report that he feels stronger, more vibrant, and more energetic than most people his age. Which, honestly, it forces us to ask a really profound question. What does true strength actually look like when you strip away the ego of youth?
That is the core question here. True strength, as modeled by his current lifestyle, is an emergent property of integration.
Integration.
Yes. The weights and the physical training are only one vector. If he continued to lift heavy weights but fueled his body with the meat-heavy diets of the 1980s, his vulnerable cardiovascular system would eventually fail, rendering the skeletal muscle completely useless.
Right.
But conversely, if he adopted the 80% plant-based diet but lived in an isolated state of chronic psychological stress, the cortisol would degrade his tissues regardless of the clean fuel.
So it functions like a three-legged stool. You have diet, right? The high-fiber, plant-based protein that's protecting the heart, maintaining the muscle. Then you have movement, the consistent daily physical resistance. And then you have compassion, the emotional bonding with his animals that regulates his nervous system and bathes his biology in oxytocin.
Yes.
If you kick out any one of those legs, the entire structure of his longevity collapses.
The integration of diet, movement, and compassion creates a completely sustainable ecosystem within his body. It speaks volumes about the neuroplasticity of the human brain, really, and our capacity for behavioral reinvention.
Totally. And for you listening to this deep dive, you likely already understand the ethical and nutritional power of plants. You are part of the vegan community. But the story we were looking at today is the ultimate rebuttal to the excuse that it is ever too late to change.
It really is.
We often hear people say, oh, I'm too set in my ways, or I've eaten this way for 50 years, the damage is already done.
But the human body's capacity to heal and adapt is astonishing, provided you remove the biological insults and provide the correct tools for regeneration.
Exactly. Here's a man who is the undisputed king of a culture that glorified immense meat consumption. He literally wrote the book on it.
He did.
And if he can completely abandon the hyper-processed protein powders he helped sell to the world, if he can pivot to whole plant foods to save his heart, and find deep daily joy in the companionship of a rescue pig, then the entrenched habits of everyday life are absolutely conquerable for anyone.
Absolutely.
It just obliterates every single excuse regarding age and ingrained behavior.
It really redefines the very concept of discipline. In his 20s and 30s, his discipline was entirely outward-facing. It involved punishing his body, pushing through pain, and consuming vast quantities of animal products to build an impenetrable exterior, completely disregarding the internal biological costs.
Yeah, whatever it took to look the best.
Right. But today, his discipline is deeply inward-facing. It is applied to nurturing his endothelium, protecting his heart with fiber, and fostering a peaceful, compassionate environment with his animals. It is a quiet, sustainable, and fundamentally more mature iteration of strength.
Wow. Yeah, we have spent the last hour really unpacking an unbelievable life arc. We watched a man retrofit his biology, swapping out destructive heavy fuels for a clean, efficient plant energy.
We did.
We watched him trade the ego-driven isolation of the conqueror for the genuine, grounded connection of a caretaker, and it's just so inspiring.
The transition from conqueror to caretaker is truly the ultimate takeaway here. He recognized that the massive armor he built on the outside was powerless to protect him from the vulnerabilities on the inside. His survival required a total paradigm shift.
It did.
And as you move forward today, I want to leave you with a philosophical question built on his biological journey. What outdated, destructive version of strength or discipline are you holding on to in your own life? And what might you need to terminate in order to truly heal and thrive?
Man, a profound thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this Vegan Stuff with Caavakushi deep dive. We hope this exploration to the mechanics of longevity, plants, and compassion has armed you with fresh insights. Keep questioning the paradigms, keep learning, and maybe find a moment today to share some joy with an animal. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening. We hope you liked this episode. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Also, we would be so appreciative if you could just share this episode or this podcast with all your friends and family who are vegans or vegan friendly. We're also really excited because we are going to be launching something really cool pretty soon on the site, so keep an eye out for that. And we will see you really soon with a new episode.